This is one text that really kind of caught my mind when I was writing the covenant code because it was so specific. 2 Peter 3:3 says, knowing this first, that there will come in the last days scoffers, walking after their own lusts. Knowing this first, that there will come in the last days scoffers, walking after their own lusts, and saying, where is the promise of his coming? For since the fathers fell asleep, all things continue as they were from the beginning. So I want you to notice how many areas it attacks. First of all, it attacks creation. It's all been the same since creation. Remember, this is written in Peter and Paul's time, so Christ had just come. He'd just come, and the world had just witnessed his arrival. And this guy's saying, from the beginning of creation, um, everything's remained the same. All things continue as they were from the beginning of creation. For this they willingly are ignorant of. So in other words, they're stupid on purpose. That by the word of God, the heavens were of old, and the earth standing out of the water and in the water, whereby the world that was then, being overflowed with water, perished. But the heavens and earth, which are now, by the same word, being kept in store, reserved unto fire against the day of judgment, and perdition of ungodly men. But, beloved, be not ignorant of this one thing, that one day with the Lord is 1,000 years, and 1,000 years as one day. I always wondered why that was snuck into that particular set of verses, but the scoffers have, they're scoffing the return of Jesus, um, the creation, and the flood. And so anyway, I wanted to think about man and our observations and just how silly we look when we don't even realize how silly we look thinking about standing there arguing with God and all these proud men and whatever. But we look at empirical laws and theories basically as when we look at our observational, like our science laws, whatever. So a law is described as what happens in nature through summarized, repeatable, and often mathematical patterns, while scientific theories explain why these phenomena occur. Laws are proven specific observational facts, whereas theories are comprehensive, well-sustainable framework that explain the underlying mechanisms. A theory does not evolve into a law. So I have a theory. It's called the Bible. It's 66 books long. It's the framework of what everything happened. And I have a law that's called the covenant law, covenant code. It's called the law of God. And on that, you can explains everything, including what these scoffers, talk about over. So um, I do this more as a study, so it's not quite polished or finished, but we'll share it together and have you be able to be part of it. So where did this all start? It all started with a covenant, and not a contract, a covenant. And that covenant started on the day of man's creation. It started in heaven, and it was declared in heaven. It was like a royal decree type of uh, covenant, and says, "Let us make mankind in our image," and that's when the word for God being used was Elohim, which was the plural name for God. Let us make man in our image, in our likeness, so that they may rule over the fish of the sea, the birds in the sky, over the livestock, all the wild animals, and over all the creatures that move um, along the ground. So this is this blessing. So yeah, it was pronounced on uh, man's creation, and when we talk about the tabernacle and stuff like that, remember it says, "Let them make me a sanctuary that I may dwell among them." Well, the first sanctuary was actually Eden. Um, that was that was the first place that God dwelt among men, among men and women. And it was also most holy. It was made holy by God's presence. There's nothing that makes something more holy than the presence of God. So the first sanctuary, this Eden, this thing we've all kind of imagined, but we've never seen, this perfect harmony, beautiful place that God was dwelling with his people. And when it got interrupted, all of a sudden there's paradise lost, but the because of that covenant relationship that God had already established with man, man wasn't just another creature or whatever. Man belonged to God. He was God's representative on earth, like a son, or like a basically well, someone that you're in a covenant relationship with. So he made this very personal statement to the serpent. And I will put enmity between thee and the woman, and between thy seed and her seed. He shall bruise thy head, and thou shalt bruise his heel. So imagine, if you will, like imagine you're Adam or Eve, and you've broken this covenant, and you're kind of looking into the ruins of death. You're looking into this paradise lost, and you hear from the voice of the Lord that he is personally going to now step in the gap, and that he's personally going to destroy the one that tried to destroy you, and that not only that, he's going to suffer injury in doing it, and yet he's the one proclaiming it. So now you know that you're part of what put him in that position, and yet he's doing it unflinchingly. Now, how do you feel about losing that covenant relationship? Now that more light has been shed on it, now it's like, why would I want to get out of that relationship? And that's when things become more personal. That's when Adam says, for the first time, calls his wife Eve, meaning mother over all living, that he believes the word of God, and when they were put out of paradise, of course, we had the cherubim with the swords guarding them that same east gate, and in the tabernacle it has the east entrance, and we see cherubim set up in various locations that are very strategic, like they were guarding the way guarding the way to the tree of life here in the garden. But it's something where this whole idea of the tabernacle, well, of the covenant, um, is to get paradise back, paradise lost, to regain it. And it's not something that God has to do differently. It's an opportunity for man to clean up man, to cleanse man, and to have him be able to be before God again. It's this it's the covenant allows God to work on man's heart and transform us in such a way that we can then be um, in direct contact with God again, face to face, without being consumed. So when you look at the garden on one hand and the tabernacle on the other, they really are um, focused on the same thing, different stories, but one pattern. That pattern of the tabernacle is God's mercy. It's God's God saying, let them make me a sanctuary that we may dwell together. But it's to restore Eden. It's to restore that original purpose. And then when you go through Revelation and the New Jerusalem and all this sort of stuff, it was always to restore the relationship between God and man. So, like I said, it's not a contract. It's this beautiful covenant, um, and that's God's purpose. That's why He will achieve it. This fulfillment of a covenant is the serpent being destroyed and God dwelling with man. You know, what's exceptional, and I think about this too, a lot of people say, well, here's a contract. I want you to read this and understand it, or study this and understand it. This is the only time you'll ever hear of a covenant that was made three-dimensional, so that you not just hear it, you experience it. You experience it every day. God made a three-dimensional model of how he would redeem man through Christ. So when you want to enter into the covenant, oh, there's a gate here on the east side. Just, bring your lamb through here. Now you've entered the covenant, you know. You want to, you experience the high cost of sin. You experience the shame. You also experience the cleansing, and you experience the communion and all that sort of stuff. Even, the fact that this labor was made out of the mirrors, the women's mirrors out of Egypt. That there's such a high polished copper, and as a priest, you had to wash after the altar and before going in. But you would see your own reflection so clearly in that water when you're washing the blood from your hands. So you'd realize no matter who you were, that you were part of what caused that sacrifice. Like if nobody else sinned but you, that lamb would have had to been sacrificed, because so you never escape reality of that. You're, even though you're a minister, you're also a sinner. And that was one of the things talked about in Hebrews about the difference between the pattern versus the reality in Christ. So anyway, you need this three-dimensional pattern that all through the 1400 years that they're worshiping this pattern, he was transforming his people too. He was teaching them not only how to recognize the Messiah, but teaching them about redemption and about everything that was required for their cleansing, for their atonement. And it was given very specifically. Everything, we studied it all out. Every piece of furniture, every day, every way, just given with such precision. There's no book like the Bible where everything, it's like the third day of the 10th month, and this happens on the seventh day of the third, like the Tabernacle board says 20 on this side, 20 on that side, and these two make up the corners, like so specific. And and I'm kind of building towards something that these are all things that make the Bible unique, and make it unique from every other religion, but make the writing itself unique. And I want to share something kind of new with you. We've looked at numbers before. We've looked at how the first numbers are the biblical timeline between Adam and Jesus matches the mercy seat dimensions given in that pattern. Well, I'm not sure if we talked about it before. I think we did once very briefly a couple of years ago. But there's something called the golden ratio, and that's the proportion between numbers. So the closer you get to it, the closer you get to this what considered a perfect number, or the golden, or the divine. And it's observed in architecture and things like that, but it's also mostly observed in nature, like in the way that sunflower seeds laid out in a spiral, and the way leaves on a tree are, and everything else. It's this number that has fascinated scholars for thousands of years. But they consider it, the golden ratio, or sometimes called the divine ratio. But it's like a stamp all throughout creation. The proportions of man, and it's supposed to be the most beautiful ratio and stuff like that as well. There's a way when you have a line, a long line, where you can see where the golden ratio is. And the shortcut for that is so this line is a distance. It's a distance between Adam and the atonement of Christ. So it's measured in years. So if I'm measuring this line, I would say, where is the golden ratio of this line? The shortcut is take the number and then times it by 0.375. So if you get your calculator, I'll do it together with you. Okay. So 4140, that's the years from Adam to Jesus, times 0.375. I'm not sure if that's the right. 4140. Yeah. So the number is 1552.5. Okay. And if we look, I'll tell you in advance, but that's the number of years between the birth of Moses and the ministry of Christ. It's exactly 1552.5. So the the most perfect place that relationship could fall on that timeline would be right there, right where Moses is. So you think, well, so what? Well, is that number that perfect ratio that's seen in all through God's creation now shows up in this timeline of between Adam and Christ. And let me take another look. So, okay, look at. So here's where that line is. So if we take a look at all these years from Adam to Moses, that's 25,875. And then from here, it's 1552.5. So if you look at these three big lines, you got this line here, 4140, this one here, 275,875, and this line here. If you, and it means nothing by looking at them, but that is the golden ratio between those numbers. So now let's do this for our own self. I'll have George take 1656 and tell me what number would be the perfect place to the golden separation between the years from Adam to Noah. So 1656 times 0.375. Do we have an answer?
621.
621? You mean right here, where this line already exists, with the 621 years between Adam and the birth of Enoch? The golden ratio between Adam and Noah is right here, the birth of Enoch, the seventh generation, by the way. But these things couldn't possibly be from God, these timelines. What about the 2,484 years between Noah and the birth of Jesus? So 2,484 times, excuse me, that's the same thing.
931.5 years.
Oh, right, exactly where Moses.
Right there.
1656 plus 931.5 is the 2587. Every one of those is a golden, is the golden number of the divider. So not only in relation to each other are they all a golden, like a divine ratio, but they're also the numbers of the mercy seat. Now, what number have we been multiplying it by? 0.375, right? That's the shortcut. Well, what's the dimension of the mercy seat? 1.5 by 2.5. What's that? 3.75. That mercy seat is a perfect ratio. in geometry, the mercy seat is in that 5:3 8 ratio. And one way you can look at this is to go, okay, well, how do I understand the golden ratio a little bit more? So the big number, the long number, will be 8 times the number. The middle number will be 5 times the number. And the smaller number will be 3 times the number. That gets 3, 5, 8. That's the ratio. 4140 divided by 8. Okay, so 4,140 years divided by 8. We're looking for ratio right now. That's 517 and a half years. So 517 and a half, if I times that by 3, I get 15.5 to 155, 2.5. So can you see that every one of those, like I said, so you just take the longer number and then you multiply that by 0.375, and that'll always tell you the golden ratio of that number. So and here's something, we look at this number, this particular number, 2587.5, and this is exactly when Moses comes along to give this law and to codify it. And remember, that's what he was doing. This covenant was given way back here. Moses is now writing it down, codifying it. Sabbath started back here, sacrifices started back here, but this is now becoming the codified law, the covenant code. He's told to write it, and he writes it out. So these things are in a book. And we talk about a law is supposed to show you the math behind something. The explanation is the framework is all, this whole existence is all about this covenant and this fulfillment, because when Christ fulfills it, then the serpent's head's crushed, and Eden's restored, regained. So that's the whole purpose of it all. That's what these, when you simplify things, that's wherever God dwells, is holy and most holy. So the whole thing about whether he dwells with us in the New Jerusalem or Eden or the Tabernacle, that's what makes it holy, is God, the presence of God. And so when we the ark is never lost. It's not talked about for a long time, and all of a sudden it shows up again, right in chapter 11 of Revelation, the same chapter that says measure, the tabernacle. And what does it say? It's the very last sign we're going to get, because you hear thunders and lightnings after that. It says the temple was open in heaven, and you could see the ark. And the people on earth understood, that message. They obeyed it and understood it. And that's all we're doing is measuring the ark and measuring stuff. But these timelines we got. So we have, first of all, they're all in relation to each other. They all meet the divine ratio. Second of all, they're all 1.5 times 2.5. They're all mercy seat dimensions up until there. So you have 621 years times 1.5, 931 and a half, times 2.5, 15.525. So Enoch times 1.5 is the same as from Noah to Moses, and times 2.5 from Moses to Jesus. The 1,035 years between Enoch and Noah, 1,035 times 1.5 is this 15,525. Times 2.5 is this 25,887.5. So it's a perfect puzzle. It's mercy seat dimensions. It's golden uh, ratio dimensions, and once you convert it into prophetic years, where every 69 observed years equals 70 prophetic years, it's also high Sabbaths, because this becomes 1,680 prophetic years.
It really shouldn't shock us because we're told he's a God of order.
out of order, and everything he gave us to observe. So remember I said, he made this pattern and he made this furniture and these things for us to experience the covenant three-dimensionally. When they went out to bring a lamb, and there's all real things they're doing. Well, now we're seeing that this entire timeline, all of these people, all of the people that God raised up along, you know, um, to in response to the serpent, like whether it's Pharaoh or whatever, they all lived in a tabernacle timeline, like a timeline that only God could. You have to know the end from the beginning to know. Okay, the, this is when this person is going to be born. This is when this is going to happen, because it's not kind of in the same order. It's exactly in the same up until the atonement, and the atonement was the main thing. But there's a verse in Hebrews that a lot of people have a hard time understanding. What they have a hard time understanding is, the thing about the blood and the goats and all this sort of stuff. Everyone says, well, why did God have everybody sacrifice animals and then say that he wasn't pleased about it or whatever, or say that they have no avail, they meant nothing? But that's not what Hebrew says. It says that the Holy Spirit testifies that until that the the veil was the body of Christ. And that's Paul says, the veil, his flesh. Until Christ made the sacrifice, there was no access into the most holy place. So the tabernacle pointed forward to that sacrifice. So faith, when they were making those sacrifices, it was faith that they were rewarded for. Was when they brought their lamb and stuff like that. It was faith. They observed the pattern given to them, but faith was pointing forward to the actual sacrifice. Just like in our case, it points backwards. From our day. We don't need a new sacrifice. So it wasn't. This whole pattern was based upon a reality that Christ would make that atonement, and nothing would be real, nothing like the blood of the covenant, the actual atonement for sin. But it's real now. The only thing that it calls for in the Day of Atonement was the high priest has to put back on his royal clothes and come out in his robes of royalty and bless the people so that they are sure that their atonement was accepted. So it calls for a delivery. So it's signed, sealed, but Jesus has to come in his glory to deliver it. And that's when you guys are talking around about every eye shall see. Yeah, every eye shall see, because they have to know, including those that pierce Christ, so that there's nobody that won't see, and it's not the same type of day for everybody. It's a bad day for some people. It's a great day for others. So, but it's the same day though. It's the same time. So, so we have this incredible. I mean, this is the part I added to my book near the end. There's one more part that I told you I'm gonna start writing about in the next book. But when you really look at this, I mean, these are measurements from the tabernacle. I mean, I just see incredible beauty here, and it's the same thing where you look at a sunflower seeds, when you look at how the leaves are arranged on a tree, or you look at the proportions of your face or your height or whatever, and go, that's beautiful. That's the stamp of God. Well, he did the same thing now in space and in time, where it's undeniable. That these exact timing of not just the first one, but the second and the third, and how they're related to each other. This came and then exactly that. So we're in such a blessed time where we're living in a time that God foreknew, and foretold, the end times, but that he set us up at this time, to be his final witnesses, to hear what he had to say, to be brave about it, and to tell others, show others the beauty of, the truth of his word at a time when everybody's, there's all these Goliaths out there, that really are nothing, the theory of evolution, all these sort of things that really, have blinded people, um, love to talk to Ryan sometime about that too, but just get your thoughts on that. But anyway, um, so that's kind of my informal presentation for today. But I was anxious to show you those numbers and how, we've never talked about them before. Does everybody understand that? Is there any other questions on that, or anyone have any comment or questions on those numbers?
Thank you, Brent.
Hey, Brent. Is
Yeah.
that going to be in your book too?
Yes, it is.
Cool.
Yeah. Yeah. There's
Amazing.
a whole more than a chapter on it, and but what I like about it is that I'll also show you the way to work it out, like how to not just it's there. I'll show you how to, because that way you can use it on any number. You might come across some other number and say, well, I wonder what the golden ratio is on that one, expecting to maybe find something of that golden ratio. So, for example, um, let's just pick a number. Well, I think we've done the ones in here. Um, well, I don't know if there'll be one to this one or not because it's kind of a small one, but
Can I toss you a bone?
yeah.
Is there anything in the 6,000 year that's a golden ratio?
Yeah, but there's a part that I can't. Remember, I said there's something I wanted to write about twice. I wanted to present to you guys, and both times, I mean, it couldn't have got worse. Lost my whole presentation. I mean, 15 minutes before toenail got whacked off. Horrible, and it's just weird. I mean, it's not. I sound like a drama queen, but it's like, I swear to God, it's only when it will try to write about that. And then but I know it's not bad. Like, it's not like I'm writing about something bad. What it is it really kind of sharpens the numbers up a little bit. It's kind of like, you see why the 1260 days, and what, why it was 1260 days, and what that means to the, 40 days, 40 nights, all this stuff. And some of the things we already were discovering in the tabernacle boards and in the covering.
Maybe we're not supposed to know.
And that's where so when you ask that question about the ratio, on a 6,000 year period, it comes up again there too. So that's what we'll be studying for next year. I'll get this book out, and then we'll be writing the next book.
Well, thank you very much. I'm amazed because every talk we have every week is bringing out more and more proof of the Bible and what Jesus says and Mrs. White. And I mean, it's just proof. And we believe we don't really need the proof, but it just backs us up. And it's just so much. And I do believe he is coming soon because so much is coming out at the end here.
Yeah. Yeah. And, he said something there. He said that, we don't need, I mean, it's encouragement to us. We don't need it to believe whatever, but we always got to be careful on that too, because I had a pastor tell me that. And, but, we're supposed to be witnesses to a lost generation, and that's where it can come in handy. That's where it can come in. Let me show you something that you've never heard before,
We need to share, share, share.
Yeah, let me show you some actual evidence that, that there's something special here. I mean, I even, sometimes you get that where your heart burns or you get really excited and it's like making a discovery. But when I was doing my book and I had gone through those numbers before years ago, but I'd never done them on each individual timeline. And when I started doing that, I got pretty excited, thinking, "Man, what an incredible God!" So